Hi, welcome back to the workshop for what is the 45th instalment of my epic 335 build. And in this instalment we're going to get the guitar ready for spraying by grain filling the neck. But there's a couple of little jobs that I need to get done before we can do that, starting with getting the little wooden wedges put in place under the end of the fingerboard. Okay, so exciting times. We really have just got a handful of little jobs to do now before we can get this guitar into finish, and I know everyone's desperate to see that, none more so than me. First thing I'm going to tackle, and we talked about this before, is this little gap underneath the fretboard. There's one on either side. I just need to fill that, and as I said in the last episode, I'm going to make some little maple fillets that are going to go in there. So I've cut a tiny little sliver of maple, and I'm just going to kind of make this into a wedge shape with a block plane and just get that down to kind of rough dimensions that way, and then we can sand it in to make it an absolutely perfect fit as to where we need it. So first thing I need to do is just move the guitar out of the way so it doesn't get damaged in this process. I'm going to fasten the bit of maple down onto this bit of wood with super glue and masking tape, and then just shave that taper in. That actually went a lot better with a proper hand plane as opposed to the block plane. So we just need to get that off now and give it its first test fit. So that is actually a really nice tight fit, but it's kind of gone in on an angle. So I'm just going to take that out. And I'm just going to trim that corner down, and that's still a little bit loose, so let's take a little bit more off. And that's about right. So that just needs a little bit of fine sanding now, just to get that end here a little bit thinner. And that is about spot on. So I'm just going to take that out, put it to one side. A little bit of masking tape down. Just to protect the top. Okay, so just stuck that on with a bit of tight bond. And wipe any excess off. And I'll just leave that for an hour or so to set up, and we can look at trimming it off. Okay, while we're waiting for that to dry, I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about a tool or a set of tools that I've been using quite a bit in the last few episodes, and I've had a couple of questions about them, and it is these, my little set of transfer punches. For me, if you're serious about building guitars, this is kind of £15 that you want to spend. They're not particularly expensive, but they are absolutely brilliant when it comes to laying stuff out. And if you haven't seen them before, basically what they are, they're little metal pins with a sharp end on, but they're kind of very specific sizes. And the idea is that once you have your component in the position that you want it in. You just put your transfer punch through the hole, making sure it doesn't move, give it a tap, and then you very accurately mark the centre of where your hole needs to be. It might not sound like a big deal, but depending on what component it is you're using and the size of hole that you're drilling is, say you're drilling a 10mm hole and you get your centre point out by a quarter of a hole, which doesn't sound unreasonable if you're just eyeballing something, you know, you're going to be 2.5mm out. And that's a big deal, especially when you're working to the kind of tolerances that you do when you're building a guitar. So these make your life a lot easier, a lot less time consuming, and it's just one of those little tricks that will kind of take your guitar building on to the next level. As I said before, they're not particularly expensive. These were about £15. They have their roots in the engineering world, and a good set for engineering use would cost you an awful lot more money, but they would be a lot better quality. I think if you tried to use these on hard metals, they would very, very quickly become dull and useless, but for woodworking purposes, they're absolutely ideal. It's a little bit close to Christmas now, so Santa might not be able to bring you a set of these, but they are definitely worth getting. Okay, so that's been left for a little while now, so it should be good and dry. So I'm simply just going to take a very sharp scalpel and gently trim that away. Okay, and there's the finished wedge. Really happy with that. I think once you get a bit of finish onto the body, you won't be able to tell that that's been done. So since the last episode, I've actually had a nice delivery of all the electrical components that we're going to need on the build, which led me to an interesting and really nice discovery, in so much as I've actually discovered that with a bit of fiddling around, I can get a lot of these components into the body with my fingers through the F-hole, which is a major bonus. It's not something I've ever had before. I've done thin line Telecasters and you wouldn't be able to do that. So it appears I can get 3 of the pots into place and the switch without really needing to fish them through on bits of line or anything. So that's a major bonus. That's made me very, very happy. But what it did discover also, which wasn't quite so good, was that the pot that goes down here, so the tone pot for the bridge pickup, which goes in there, was actually fouling the kerfing in this area, so it wouldn't go in. So I've had to do a little bit of remedial work, and I'd recommend any tool enthusiast with a nervous disposition look away now, because I had to improvise a tool to kind of relieve some of the kerfing from this area through the F-hole. I was really worried how I was going to do this, but in the end, once I'd decided what I was going to do, it was actually fairly straightforward with my improvised kerf removal chisel. Don't worry, it was a very, very old, cheap chisel that I had knocking around. It is relatively sharp, and I simply just bent it so I could get it in through the F-hole at the right angle and just cut the kerfing away. I thought it was going to be an absolute nightmare to do that. In the end, it turned out not too bad. So I'm happy now that all the controls will fit fine. All the holes are the right sizes, and I think I'm only going to have to kind of fish in this pot here and the output jack with probably dental floss or something like that. So that's a major bonus. I'm really happy about that, because it can be a bit of a nightmare if you've got to fish all of the controls in. Everything just gets tangled up and your life becomes miserable. But this way, like I say, only got to do 2, so happy days. Okay, with those last few little jobs done, we can actually start the process of getting this ready for finish now. I suppose it could be argued that these will be the first stages in the finishing process. So to get the ball rolling on that, I need to get this neck grain filled. The body won't need grain filling because it's maple and it's incredibly tight grained, so that's not a problem, but this mahogany will need it. Otherwise we'll have to put like 1,000,000 gallons of lacquer on to get anything like a decent finish. So first thing I'm going to do in preparation for the grain filling is just mask off this binding, because we don't want the coloured grain filler to get onto that because it will mark it. So I'm just going to run a line of this blue tape along there. And I'm also going to mask off the body to neck joint, because we don't want any filling on that either. And with that done, we can get some grain filler mixed up. And as always, I'm just going to use some plasterboard joint filler to do this grain filling with. It's readily available. It's probably as cheap as you're ever going to get. This tub was less than £5 and I've had it for absolute years and it's still going strong. And it's simply just a case of getting a little bit in a container, mixing it up with a bit of water. It wants to be fairly loose but not runny, and that's the kind of consistency you're looking for. And for this application I'm just going to add a little bit of brown water-based dye. I'm just going to put a pair of gloves on to keep the stain off of my hands. And I'm just going to apply this with a little plastic spreader, the type you would get for putting car filler on with. And I'm kind of working this as best I can across the grain, not with it. So it's getting nice and squidged in. And now I've got that all covered, I'm just going to use a damp tissue, and again kind of going at 45 degrees to the grain, and I'm just taking the bulk of this off just to save on sanding time. Right, and I'm just going to leave that to set up for a couple of hours and we can get sanding it off again. Okay, so that's nice and dry now, and it has dried quite an alarming pink colour, but don't let that worry you, we'll be rubbing virtually all of this back off again. So first up I'm just going to take some 240 wet and dry paper and just start sanding this off. And as you can see, this goes really quickly. So that's all been rubbed down now to 400 grit, wet and dry, so it's feeling nice and smooth, and you can see but there's still filler in their grain. So I'm just going to give my hands a quick wash, clean up the work area, get rid of as much of this dust as I possibly can because it will stain stuff, and then we can take the masking tape off and have a look and see how close we are. Okay, had a good clean up, so let's just get this tape off and have a look at things. It's looking very nice. A little bit of cleaning up to do, but not too bad at all. And that's all looking very nice. I'm really happy with that. So that's the neck. Grain filled, everything's sanded to 400 grit, so it's nice and smooth, and we're about ready to get some finish on the neck. There's a few little bits and bobs that I need to sort out on the body, just a few little scratch marks and stuff that have just come from handling it repeatedly, but I would say there's probably about 20 or 30 minutes work in doing that. So we're very close now to getting finish on this guitar. However, it's the 23rd of December. It's Christmas in a couple of days' time, and I'm going to take a little bit of time out. So I'm going to have a week off. A few reasons. A, we all need a rest. B, it's Christmas. And C, this is going to be quite a complicated spray job that I'm doing on this. It's going to be several stages of work, and it's something I can't rush. And there is absolutely no way on earth I would get this done in 2 or 3 days in time to carry on with my normal upload schedule. So I'm going to be back very early in the new year with a video of how we get this sprayed up into my chosen finish. If I don't get the opportunity to speak to you again before, have an absolutely amazing Christmas. I want to thank each and every single person who tunes into these videos for the investment of your time into what I do in my shed down the bottom of my garden. It's been an amazing year for me. Let's do it all again next year. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.